from earlier. So good evening and welcome everybody. Welcome to WSP offices. My name's Jolie Hill. I'm an Associate Transport Planner here at WSP and I'm also on the Board of Directors of the Transport Planning Society. So I'd like to give my thanks to everybody for coming today and everybody online as well. The cameras are up there. To this great event, which was sold out. We are pretty much full in this room. So it's great to have so many of you here. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank CIHT, CILT and Women in Transport for supporting tonight's event as well and promoting it. I just need to do a couple of quick housekeeping. So the toilets are back by the kitchen and turn left and just through those doors. There's no planned fire alarm. We had one at 10:30 this morning, which scared the life out of me because I'm normally on a Wednesday. So if a fire alarm goes off, it is a real one. So just follow the WSP staff and the marked exit. If you have any questions, please save them till the end. We've got a specific Q&A session. So we are going to have some welcome and introductions from our panelists, a quick reflection from each of them. Then we're going to do a half-an-hour panel discussion with questions, and then we will do our Q&A. We are aiming, I think the agenda's been updated. Apologies, I don't know if it's been updated online. We're going to finish at 7:30 because we have to be out of here by 8. So it's an hour session. So yeah, I'm really proud to be here as a board director on the Transport Planning Society tonight. And tonight reflects TPS's role in driving better skills, standards and sector conversations. And tonight is very much a part of that mission. For those of you who aren't already TPS members, here goes the plug. We offer so much that strengthens both your careers and the wider profession. So we provide a cross-sector community of planners, engineers, policymakers, researchers, urban designers. You can access CPD, events, learning opportunities. Bear with me. We have lots of pathways for professional development, including the Chartered Transport Planning Professional Qualification. We are a platform to influence and have national conversations on various transport planning issues. And importantly, and this is something I love about TPS, is a space where we can come together, discuss challenges like this, and in a way that's constructive, evidence-driven and forward-looking. So if tonight resonates with you, I'd really encourage you to explore TPS membership if you haven't already. Plenty of TPS members here. If you want to have a chat, put your hand up if you're a board director or TPS member. Let's have a look. Yeah, good. Okay. So if anybody wants more information, please just come and see me at the end or speak to anybody that put their hand up. So the purpose of this evening is about shining a light on how gender safety and lived experiences shape the way people move through our streets, stations and public spaces. It's about the practical steps we can take to create places that genuinely work for everyone. It's also about shifting the culture of planning and transport so that inclusion isn't just an add-on, something that built into the way that we design and make decisions. I just want to add something to my notes that based on this situation that's happened today. So I just want to acknowledge that safety affects a range of groups, and given the news story today, we're not simply making spaces for women and girls only. We are here trying to make spaces safer for everyone and promote equitable communities where everyone is welcome. So we have an incredible panel here with us today, leaders from across practice, policy, and I'm really looking forward to hearing all the ideas and experiences and case studies that they'll be sharing with us. So thank you all again for being here, and I hope you will be contributing later with your questions, and let's get this started. So please can you all introduce yourselves, your role, a key project or example you would like to share with us.
No, flashing. Oh no. Let me just try this one. Technical hitch. Come on.
Okay, so I'm Alison Bradshaw. I'm in TfL Spatial Planning team. We are the front door for developers for London, if they want to come in and talk to us about developments. And I also lead our women and girls work, and I also chair a group of people across TfL looking at how we incorporate women and girls into our public realm design.
Thanks. So my name is Susan Liberta. I'm an associate at WSP. I've been at WSP for 11 years now. And for the last 5 years, I've led our gender inclusive design work stream. So that's encompassing all genders, but there has been a core focus on women and girls. It's a very exciting time in the sector. We're seeing a lot of movement and shift and policy momentum in this space. Our team does focus on broader accessibility and inclusion as well. So I lead the team with my colleague Melinda, who is the project director and board member for NCAT, which is National Centre for Accessible Transport. So yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Hello, I'm Susanna. I run an organisation called In Her Place, and which basically involves working with anybody from councils to developers to public bodies to create spaces that work better for women and girls. And I do this across the board. So just to give you an idea, this week I have done 2 seminars for Active Travel England, hello if you were there, on gender and active travel. I've been talking to people in Nottinghamshire Sports and Parks Department about access to green spaces, and I'm here. And then there was one other thing I've forgotten, but never mind. So I work across a whole lot of stuff, but safety and transport is a huge part of what I do.
I've actually prepared a much longer spew. That's okay. I'm Stephanie Yu, Senior Transport Planner in Arup. My background is in development planning, so I do quite a lot of heavily involved in design development and lots of interaction with clients and architects, landscape architects. For those familiar with what a transport assessment is, we do quite a lot of things on the active travel zone assessment as well. So doing audits on daytime, nighttime audits on the site surroundings, and looking at key routes to the key amenities that future site users would access by active travel. Well, if you've got time for me a bit more, I like to share one of the projects that I worked on. We worked on with Alison very closely on that one. It's a student accommodation and a builders merchant regeneration scheme in Paddington. In the run-up to the call-in preparation, we have received quite last minute a women's safety audit from TfL, and we have to respond to that. And in responding to that, we prepared our own, we sort of scoped our own type of women's safety audit as a response. And what we're trying to do is to audit the site surroundings, audit our actual site, the proposals, in a lens of women's safety. Because it's the first time that we've embedded a women's safety audit in a planning application, we developed our own methodology and with our own sort of project experience and from elsewhere. That included a literature review of the current policy, our very own Cities Alive research, did a daytime, nighttime audit. Actually very useful to have members from diverse backgrounds having a good debate on site on what is considered safe. Lastly, we've just kind of gathered all the data that we've got for a site review and recommendations for the client to take forward. So some of the topics that we looked at was wayfinding, design of lighting, design of the function of the space. What else? The maintenance and cleanliness of the area and kind of looking out for any hidden spots that is potential for creating issues on women's safety and girls. And so we then did was comparing really contrast with the baseline provision and showing what this scheme would bring about in improving women's safety and what else we can then suggest to the client to further enhance the experience. And with the finding, we have then reworked the design quite a lot and including measures from the outset and also creating a package of Session 106 with the client and just kind of really women's safety driven and prioritized measures and balancing TFL and GLA's advice and also the scheme viability, etc. So yeah, well, kind of what I wanted to bring up the example to this panel is we admittedly it's quite a bit of a late exercise. We had to do quite a lot of changes to the plan, to the schemes, very last minute, short time scale. But I think I think we worked quite well, and I hope CFO was very happy with that. I was expecting Pia's nodding. I'll take that. But yeah, I think we all learned something about it from our side, from the consultant side, client side, and actually driving that conversation. And I think in the end, it's about the end users and which is all what the clients cared about quite a lot because of the student satisfaction. So yeah, and I think that project was a good precedent for TFL as well. So that's as well. Thank you.
Stephanie's star pupil. We were all supposed to talk about projects. We all forgot. So we'll now do all the way back. So I was supposed to talk about active travel England, but actually, because in a way it aligns better with what you're talking about. One of the other things I'm working on is there's a very interesting large-scale housing development in the southeast of England. I'm not allowed to say any more than that at the moment, but it is being designed with the needs of women and girls at the forefront, along with equity in terms of making sure that income equity is planned in as far as possible. And that's been really interesting because it's not just about making routes safe. There's been some big master planning elements to that as well, including our old friend, I'm looking at us here, Bats versus Women, because it turns out if you're at the master planning stage, it's not so difficult, because one of the things that happens is crossing the site is a hedged ancient track with trees, which the bats like. Funnily enough, women don't want to walk along that kind of thing at night. So instead, we're just planning in a completely different route for nighttime use for women and girls, which will be well lit, and the bats will be happy and the women will be happy, which probably I have now answered the question I get asked most often. But also crucially, it's about thinking about women's journeys. And we've taken inspiration from the care blocks of Bogota to reduce trip chaining. So all of the facilities, as far as possible, and who knows what will happen in future iterations when it has to go through planning. But at the moment, the aim is to group facilities as closely together. So beyond just the kind of 15-minute city, which could be quite annoying, because if all your things are 15 minutes away, you're not really reducing trip chaining. But by grouping them, you actually make active travel more accessible to women, you reduce the amount of time women spend on trip chaining, and everything is good. So that's very exciting.
Thanks. I wasn't going to touch on active travel in England because you were going to, but I'll highlight a little bit about the work that we're doing. So we started engaging with active travel England, well, we've worked with them for years, but engaging with them on gender back in 2023, 2024, and we went out and gave a full-day training session on gender inclusive design, going through the theory and the theoretical elements and research elements of how does gender and transport relate? And then we went out and did a workshop with them. We did a gap analysis on their existing tools to understand how you could enhance them from a gendered lens. And then we took them out on site. I say we, I was actually on sabbatical, so I was in Thailand. My team did this. And from there, we've continued working very closely with them. So in December last year, we were commissioned to work on a wider project to produce a design guidance product. And we are now working on developing that product for local authorities on what good looks like in terms of walking and wheeling environments. Very nuanced and challenging topic. So we're in the very early stages of that project. Phase 1 is all about understanding the problem and bringing together sort of an evidence base, although we're not using the word evidence in the way that we're framing it. And within that, not only are we we're essentially identifying 3 tiers of recommendations. Tier 1 is what should be included within the design guidance document itself, and that's based on a review of literature as well as national data sets, as well as 49, I think it is, existing guidance and toolkits that we've identified, some more broader, like Manual for Streets, for example, that don't typically have a gendered lens within them, but are well known within the sector and referred to. But then also looking at broader toolkits that do focus on gender, seeing what the gaps are, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we also don't want to make a document that's 300 pages long, 300 pages long that a local authority officer doesn't have time to read. So we've also set up a panel to kind of check and challenge our approach, because as much as I trust my team, and I think we've produced a great product. It's much bigger than us, so we need to bring in outside voices. So we've got 6 local/combined authorities challenging us from a practitioner's perspective as to what's realistic and deliverable on the ground and what they want to see. And then we've also got gender experts who have been working in this space to apply their expertise and lessons learned. And then the other tiers of recommendations are also bringing in how ATE can enhance their internal governance processes, as well as their upskilling and capacity and knowledge. And then tier 3 is around the wider sector, because it's much bigger than Active Travel England and it's not all on them. So we're also engaging with people from the Department for Transport. And then I will come to you, sorry. But just one other, also, if anyone has feedback on what you want to see in the design guidance document, please do say what you think to me, either publicly or at the event afterwards, because we want to capture that. It's not an easy task, so we very much want it to be collaborative. But another great project that we're working on, I wanted to highlight, is the North East Combined Authority. We're currently working under the Mayor and their team to deliver a regional-wide transport study into barriers from a gendered perspective, and that is with the combined authority and the 7 local authorities underneath, and then it's coming up with the transport interventions as well. And just the one thing that I love about this project is it's all about, well, it's about women and girls, but making sure that we're building on their existing local transport plan where they've already captured some evidence within this. And what was so powerful and what they've been doing is they've utilised an existing process of their LTP and enhanced their consultation to embed questions around safety, inclusion and accessibility, which is now a DfT requirement in their policy for local transport plans to consider women and girls' safety. So that is a great example. So we're building on that with voices that haven't been captured. So we've partnered with Girl Guiding, which is a relationship we built through Women in Transport, so thanks Sonia. And we are essentially using them to go out and speak to their own sort of Girl Guiding groups across the region to capture data for us. So we've got that perspective from young girls to work from.
Wow. My team within spatial planning, we started looking at this about 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago. And one of the aspects that we look after and have influence on is what something's called an active travel assessment, which Stephanie picked up, is where we ensure that developers make sure that the connections from their development that they're choosing to develop that you can physically walk to the bus stop, to school, make these essential everyday trips, and they're assessed against the Healthy Streets criteria. Well, we recognise within that's all great, but within our own discussions, we realised how different women's travel is at night and how we are changing our travel with the seasons because it gets dark, or not going out and doing exercise, or taking the car or whatever. So we realised that was a big change in night, was a big change in how women travel. So we've made it, we've added that element into our active travel zone assessment, and it's been a bit of a bumpy journey, to be honest, how that's gone down, but we're getting there. We now have, for referable application to the Mayor, we're now up to 70% of applications from 0 2 years ago now actually consider what the development's going to look and feel like at night. So I think that's a big win for development in London. The other thing that Stephanie picked up was women's safety audits. It's a bit of a misleading name. It's not actually an audit. It's about consultation, and you picked it up nicely with your Girl Guiding. It's actually going out and speaking to women and girls and hearing their voices and hearing their lived experience. And so the Mayor committed to do a pilot of how we should do this, how we should engage with women and girls, and we call that Women's Safety Audit. So we had these 5 trials across London, and they looked at all different methodologies, and we've picked one that we are going to recommend. I say we, TfL, and with MOPAC, the Mayor's Office for Policing and Communities. So, and that's online. You can use that and how we engage with women, so women and girls. So things like paying them for their time, thinking about childcare. What's really interesting is how you train up a selection of women and then they go out and ask their communities. So that could be in the language that they speak. That could be you're reaching a lot of women we rarely hear when we go and stand in libraries and do consultations. We are rarely touching these women that are in the yoga class or in the mother and baby class or any aspect of a woman's life. So it's having this extra layer of people we can reach and listen to and building that in. And our next phase will be how we turn that into transport, how we turn a feeling into a built environment, and that's the next stage of our project. But it's called Women's Safety Audits. You can look it up online. It's also linked in our nighttime guidance. So yeah, really interesting aspect.
Lovely, thank you. It's really good to hear there's different projects where this is being implemented and see how this is going forward. So I've got a list of questions here. Not expecting to get through them all, but let's start with one. I'm going to go for a big one. If you could change one thing tomorrow to accelerate progress towards more equitable transport and public spaces, what would it be and why? Who wants to go first?
Susanna's already told me this in the she's already thought about it.
I would do, well, I think, to go back to what you were saying, I think the number one thing we need to do is engage with women and girls well and listen to them thoroughly, on a very different scale to the work Alison's doing. I did some work with Social Place this summer on a development in Holloway where we worked with local women, and again in Camley Street in Camden, and the level of detail they will tell you about what is wrong with their environment and how it can be changed is extraordinary. And the other thing I would do is I would put women and girls safety into the NPPF.
That's a whole another debate for another day.
If I could change anything, it would be that we're not sitting here today talking about women and girls and why we should consider them. I mean, I've worked in the sector for 11 years, and it was only 5 years ago I started considering my own lived experience. And then once I opened up that conversation internally and also with our clients as well, it was kind of like, well, why were we never considering this? It was crazy, really. So yeah, if I could change anything, it'd be that we just do this and we're not having to have these events. Someone at work says to me, what are you going to do when all the women's safety issues are resolved? I don't know. That's very ambitious, thank you. But for me, I think it would just be that this is considered in every single project. Assumptions about how people travel are removed, and to just be curious and challenge everything. Like we did workshops as part of a day with students where we didn't mention safety because obviously they're young and you have to engage with them in a specific way. But we got big maps of their school and got them to outline their routes to school, where they liked and where they didn't like, and we split up the boys and the girls. Safety was never mentioned once, and from the ages of 12 and 13 they were already taking different routes to school based on what they perceived to be safe or less safe. So if we can make it, and this is where it is intersectional, because it's not just girls, it's like young children, and even when we've engaged with boys on a project in Earls Court, they were talking about like their nervousness around like violent crime and antisocial behaviour as well. So yeah, I think just building this into projects from early on and capturing more qualitative data and not just focusing on numbers and quantitative data, and just listening to the power of voices and stories.
That's a great point. And I think what you were trying to say there is that a lot of this great work actually doesn't just benefit women and girls, does it? It benefits everybody of all ages, of all sexes, of people who have got suitcases that might try to get up a flight of stairs where there's not an accessible place. All of those things, they're all helping everybody ultimately to design better places. So yeah, sorry, Alison, did you want to say something on this one, or Stephanie, you want to say something?
Yeah, I could say about what I would change was to actually translate it into the opportunity that we're missing by women and girls not participating in the workforce and in life, and what we're really missing out. And a lot of the time we talk about women and girls and what we could do, and oh, but I haven't got the money, Well, if I could change one thing, I could say, well, this is how much you're gaining from it. This is how much if it's small fry, the amount of changes, the amount of monetary value these changes are costing you in terms of the big thing, the big picture. We wouldn't be having this conversation. So that's what I would like to change.
Yeah.
Leave that one up there.
Yeah, thanks. I'll go a bit further, I'll go beyond planning, and I'll say sort of take everyone back to school a bit, or start talking about it very early on in there. A bit of what Susan was talking about, think about it very early on. This almost feels like it shocked me a few years ago. A colleague of mine almost almost felt like it was the first time that they have heard about women's safety or thought about women's safety only after seeing a ITB program. And yeah, it's just not something, it's about almost like a fundamental principles rather than thinking about sort of, we don't have to sit here talking about it as a specific topic. It would be built in very early on, and it would just be like a normal conversation really, when we plan things, when we think about things, when we just bring it into everyday chats really.
Great, yeah, thank you very much. Right, my next question is, what kinds of data, evidence or lived experience insight do you feel are still missing, and how could better information improve outcomes?
I still think there's a massive data gap on understanding how women travel. Is this on? Is this on? Yeah. Yeah, I don't feel like we're still, in the transport sector, we're still so heavily constrained to the peak period, getting from O to D, home to job, still very much talking in terms of blue, white collar worker. And I think this a more fluid understanding of how women travel and how they travel throughout their life, not in this homogeneous sort of chunk of workers, like I think that is probably one of the sort of problems we've got, is that we are so difficult in the way, you know, how our lives evolve. But so for me, I still would love some data on, really rich data on how women travel, all their travel, not just travel to work, all travel at all times of day and weekends.
There's an American state which is hopefully going to pass legislation that demands that wherever data is collected, as far as possible, it is sex and gender disaggregated, which would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I completely agree with that, because I came across a really extraordinary statistic the other day that while commuting is 33% of journeys, when you aggregate journeys that are for the mobility of care, that's 29% of journeys. So the model we have at the moment is really not working for a huge chunk of people who are travelling, who are, for various reasons, predominantly women. So I completely agree with that. And it's like I said, we just need to go back. We need to find out as much as possible and talk to women about their experiences as much as we can.
I think it's probably a bit controversial, but is there a way that we can find some statistics that could be used as a rule of thumb in a design meeting with architects, client team, thinking about, you know, if someone so and so has done this, is there a guidance that says, is it 10 meter, is it 20 meters, is it 30 meter, you know, something like that could work with. I think we've done some quick research on the existing guidance out there. We couldn't really find one that is very usable that we could actually bring to the team. You know, when someone, clients, the design team ask us for transport advice on, you know, what is a women's safety lens on this particular point of accessibility, for example, there isn't anything that we could directly quote or very quickly quote, but if we were able to even share so-and-so project in Bristol that's done this and it says 10 meter, that could be a good starting point for everyone to consider that, and it'd be good to actually get something quantitative rather than, I know that's, you know, someone's going to say that's not one size fits all, but it is true. But also, is there something that people can start working with some number rather than just saying, oh, we need to go out there, we need to test. This is never gonna be a good starting conversation.
At which point I'm contractually obliged to say that we have lighting for how to create streets that work for cars. We have lighting for how to consider bats. There is no guidance on lighting for the safety of women and girls. It's the law. I have to say that every time.
In terms of missing data, what have we not captured? I'd probably say best practice and case studies. I think as a sector, we're not very good at shouting about things. And we're going through this discussion now on our ATE guidance into what does a good case study look like. And from my perspective, I said we need to put solid case studies in here that have demonstrated how they considered women and girls and the impacts and the outputs of that. But again, we're still quite early in the sector of where that has been demonstrated, but then not how do I frame this? Making sure that we're not excluding schemes that have had good outputs and design interventions that do impact a wide range of users that may not have intentionally considered it. So I would like to see more best practice shared. So again, if anyone has case studies, do let me know, because we can feature them in the design guidance if it meets the criteria that we set, which we haven't set yet.
And I think this is all about, let's all keep talking as an industry and sharing what great work is already being done across all of this area now. And we need to all learn from each other and try and just spread the word out there, get more people interested in the topic area and understanding the positive impacts it can have. And then, you know, the more work we do, then the more it will filter out and be mainstream, hopefully one day.
To that.
Yep.
Just on that point as well, the more that we talk, I think sometimes the topic, when we talk about women's safety, women and girls safety, it's quite scary because it's so broad and there's so much out of our control from a design perspective. And I've had some conversations with clients who I won't name, and it's not criticism at all, but it's just, oh, I don't want to open up a can of worms because I might not be able to solve it. And that's fine. You're not going to be able to solve everything. This isn't all on you. And this is why partnership working and collaboration is really key, and it extends beyond the remit of one local authority. But where they can see it's been done elsewhere and achieved elsewhere, I think that is really promising.
I think the public are asking for it as well. There are more and more committees. I work in the world of planning commissions and committees, and more times committee members are asking about what women's safety, how's that park going to look and feel, how's that going to walk, you know, they're asking these questions. So committees are asking, the general public are asking, so we need to be prepared, ready for those answers. You know, I think a lot of it's already out the box. This topic is already out the box in many ways. So let's get ready for it and embrace it and start changing things.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So what do you see as our biggest challenges or gaps that we still need to address to make planning and transport more equitable? Who would like to start with that question?
Really similar to the other question about the challenge for me is money, and actually having actual posts in companies where you are, you know, women's safety lead, for instance. You know, I'm doing this as an aside to my real role, and a lot of people in this industry are doing that. They're not being paid. It's all extra work on top of what you're actually paid for. So there's that, and there's also kind of sort of that gender budgeting element to it. So, you know, they'll easily spend X amount of money on a hard rail infrastructure, but then we'll be a little bit nervous about spending equal amounts on a pedestrian scheme or whatever. But they're different users, they're different, and just because there's more women going to be using one scheme rather than the other, sort of having that conversation of where we're putting this money is a real challenge. Where are we spending? We've only got a finite amount of money. Who are we spending it on? Are we spending it on 52% people, or are we spending it on a certain echelon of people? And having that honest conversation, and then allocating money within our budgets to actually fix the problem.
I can add to that, which kind of overlaps. I think one is awareness and knowing how these issues translate into design, but also understanding different lived experiences and empathising with that. I think our sector in transport is less than 30% women, and that's even less, I think less than half when you look at who's actually involved in design, and that includes sort of administrative roles, HR roles, and media and marketing roles are very important, but they're not necessarily the ones making the decisions in design thinking processes. So I think there's sometimes a lot of assumptions made because it's not lived experience. So I think just being curious and challenging the norm and the way that we do things, and then that then plays out into projects. So as a consultant, we respond to briefs, and clients say to me all the time, well, you do this work all the time, why was it not in your tender response, or why was it not built into the project? And there are sometimes so many things that you're responding to within a brief. You absolutely can't include everything, although inclusion should be a core element of every project, and I 100% stand by that. If it's not always explicitly asked for, it's de-scoped as added value, and I don't think inclusion and accessibility should be added value to a project. I think it should be a core component, And I also think that programme should take into account, and this is where the awareness piece is so important, understanding the challenges around this, and engagement takes time, building trust takes time. On our project, the North East Combined Authority, there's an expert panel guiding us, and actually, because I was one of the volunteers on the GLA Women's Safety Audits, so I got the training for how to be a community researcher. We've taken that approach onto NECA, and they're doing that for us. And one of the big things that came up was, why are you as consultants going out and doing the engagement on our behalf? Because these people in our community know us already, and trust is a huge thing, particularly if you're if English isn't your first language, or you're neurodiverse, for example. But you have to factor that time into project timescales. So yeah, I think awareness and having that into project briefs and factoring into time and budget. And I know it's always hard. There's lots of competing needs, but I think it's a really core component for real change.
I completely agree with you about awareness, and in a very positive way. Because one of the things I say a lot in presentations is nobody has set out to do this deliberately. It has never been that people have set out to exclude women and girls. They just haven't thought about it. So 70% of the journey is just going, shall we think about it? And then the next chunk is, and what does this actually look like when it turns into built environment? Which is where I come in, and oftentimes it's like, I'm not going to be, it's relatively easy to write a top level policy that goes, we're going to be nice to women and girls. What that actually looks like when you build it is a really hard leap, which lots of organisations have found quite troubling. And that's where I think a lot of us are involved in helping people across that border. I think the other thing, and it goes back to data, but it's a very particular kind of data, is measuring the value. You've alluded to this, Alison, because we don't cost the benefits in terms of, which may be in terms of health, they may be in terms of mental health. We know that economically there are little bits and bobs. For example, Merseyrail did a survey and they calculated that I think it's 886 million is lost to their local economy every year because of barriers caused by women's safety. So they're not going out spending in the nighttime economy, they're taking different jobs, all of these different things. If we measured the value of what is lost or what could be gained by making this input, the profit and loss calculations would be very different. I would say at this point, if anybody has an organisation that would like to fund this, I have a team of economists literally ready to go, who have said that they would do active travel, but it's too easy, so they'd like to do public spaces, please. So, should anybody have a research grant, and we're here for this.
Yeah, I think echoing everyone's points really is just not been talked about enough, and it often gets sort of pushed down the agenda or gets diluted somewhere in the planning during the planning process. So I think that's the big issue, is also getting that lived experience in the room as well, and avoiding that gender bias, and that could be resolved or addressed by participatory design, getting everyone in the room rather than your conventional consultation process. It could be by, as I was saying a bit earlier, site experience walks, getting people's views when they're on site, actually identifying the matters on safety, connectivity, mobility, etc. I think that's very important.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move on to Q&A in a second. So I want one final takeaway from each of you, please. What is one key message or takeaway you hope that the attendees from today's session will leave with that they can apply to their work?
Well, my takeaway, my advice to everybody here would be to, rather than think outside the box, think outside the peak. Because that's we know what happens in the peak for the majority. We're totally obsessed with peak hour movements, but life happens, and a lot of women and girls travel happens outside of that peak hour. So think outside the peak. Think about travel at all times of day and night.
I would say do the research and upskill yourself. There's so much out there on this topic. I could literally probably write 1,000 books on it about how many is out there. And be curious, challenge assumptions as well. Think of your own lived experience as well as people around you. Like my mum has COPD, so she can't walk very long distances. She relies very heavily on her car, but she loves the bus to the hospital because it takes her from outside our house right to the hospital car park, and then she doesn't have to pay the parking. So she'll be really funny in a consultation because she's very anti-cyclist. But when public transport works for her, she loves it. And I would also say, just because someone's more senior than you doesn't mean they're right. If you feel strongly about something, challenge it and speak up.
Two things: ask the questions, which I think is relatively self-explanatory. Just always, is there a gender element to this? How can we apply it? What does the, has somebody else done this? Can we do it better? But also, don't be afraid of the blindingly obvious. In the engagement I was talking about in North London, one of the things that came up as part of this housing development was cycle storage, which is really important to accessing active travel. And the women involved said very clearly, why don't bike stores have windows? Because then I can see if there's anybody dodging them. And the architects were like, oh, we just put them like the bin stores wherever we can tuck them away. We've never thought of a window. And it's just so simple to fix this and to do it. But it was a real revelation for them. So just really start at the absolute bottom line, at the basic, because these small decisions can have a huge impact on women's lives.
Yeah, I think very similar to Susan's point is challenge yourself, challenge your colleague. There's no sort of right or wrong answer. It's about everyone's views, and just people don't talk about it enough. And so I think bring the conversation in the room, bring the conversation into your everyday discussion with. It doesn't have to be planning work. It could just be your everyday office topic as well. And I think get more people talking about it. It just gets to a very common thing to think about. And I think sometimes it's just like when you do yoga and you forgot to breathe, and when your yoga teacher say breathe, and that is the point that you realize you're not breathing. You start talking about it in a design team, for example. Think about, have you thought about women's safety? They go, oh, I think that's that's probably my biggest thing.
So breathe is the key from
Women's safety.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Have we got any questions in the audience? We've got at least one online. So wow. Okay. Where do I start with this? We have only got 15 minutes, so this is going to be a quick fire round answering as well, please. Right. Let's go to the front. Liani first. You have this one then.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you, Jolly, for putting this event. My name is Liani Baglietto. I'm also a board member, and I'm very excited to be having this event as part of TPS. And I also wanted to plug that this year, our bursary, every year we do a bursary competition, and the winner of last year of 2025, Victoria Isherwood, she did an incredible paper on invisible journeys made by women. So I would encourage everyone, sorry, to go plug to her paper because it's amazing, to read it. But that was one of the things that she mentioned, that as a next step, because she did a qualitative research. We developed the methodology together. We did some qualitative content analysis on that. But then the next stage was looking at the monetary aspect that we couldn't really do just yet because, of course, it includes a lot of modeling. And there's so many people that do benefit, or like stakeholders that do benefit from this. So, for example, it's not just like the economy as an abstract concept, but it's like the businesses itself, operators themselves. Everybody's journey starts with a walking journey. How many more journeys would we have if women would feel safe enough to walk to the bus at night instead of taking an Uber?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of other things that we could be measuring in terms of the economic value to different people and communicating those. So I just wanted to pick up that again, the invisible journeys part, and whether you had any other reflections on that. Invisible journeys not made, and because they're not made, they're not represented in the data. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has a reflection.
A reflection more so on the quantifying the benefits and the money side. So we speak a lot in the sector around like social value. I'm not, is this working? Yeah. I'm not a social value expert, but one of the projects we worked on with Al's Core Development Corporation, as part of their master plan, they set up something called the PRIP, which is the Public Realm Inclusivity Panel, and they've done a huge report on the social value that they've generated as a result of engaging with their local community. There's about 20 people aged 14 up to the age of 60, and it is true co-design in a way that I've never seen it. They meet monthly, they have done for almost 3 years, but people have actually gone out to set up local community groups in their own areas, but also some people have actually gone back into education. Some have even gone into education in the transport and urban design sector because they've been so inspired by what they've learned on the panel, and they've also gone back into other jobs as well because they've built their confidence. So making sure that we're not forgetting about those things to measure as well.
Completely agree on that social value, but crucially, I think one of the reasons why women's and girls' safety and other issues doesn't get included is because we can't count it. And it always ends up being environmental because you can measure biodiversity and put a number to it, you tick the box. So we know, for example, that there's been a piece of research, I think, in Austria and in Australia that quantifies the value of active travel. We need to do a bit more work to go because the value of an addition, a man who cycles 50 miles a week doing an extra mile is very different to a woman who has not cycled before doing 3 miles on her bicycle. But it comes out about £1.44 a mile on average. So we know that wasn't there. We really need to feed that into the system. I think you're absolutely right. That is the next step.
Yeah.
I would say, like we know that 40% of women in London haven't made a public transport trip because they didn't feel safe, and that goes up to 56 for teenagers. And we know it starts young. It starts girls become aware that their travel is different. They should be thinking differently about safety from the age of 11, and they're actually putting that changes in place. By the time they're 13, they're actively changing their travel because of their gender. Because it starts so early, the subconscious movements and the subconscious or not movements, or the longer way round, or I'm just not going out, is so difficult because it's so ingrained in all of us. We don't even know that, like, it's only recently, like you say, breathe, and then you realise what you've been doing your entire life, that you haven't done X, Y, and Z, because it's just our adaptive behaviours are so a part of our lives because they've been there since we were 11.
You want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's I've got my point now. I think just think about the sort of funding and viability of the schemes, and from a, if you're trying to create a new scheme, think about the area that you're creating. I think ultimately, money aside, you're trying to create something that people, your end users, would use and would enjoy, would interact, enjoy interacting with the space. And then they would then, if they can't enjoy doing this part of the scheme, they would then lose on the value in terms of they would move out. They would, worst mouth saying this is bad place, can't really get anywhere, or you were talking about reducing your footfall, and ultimately I think that could be it would be a loss situation, and ultimately it could be a case for funding.
Great, thank you. Have we got people still got questions? Wow, we're not going to be able to answer all these. So, yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you very much, everyone. I've got a question for TfL. I'm wondering if TfL has got any plan to upgrade all the tube stations to make sure there's enough toilets for commuters.
Oh. I think that we'd love to. That's not my area, but we are aware that is a big problem. Frankie's sitting behind you. We would love to. Yeah.
If we had the money, we'd obviously love to. I think the mayor's aim is to try and make sure that no one is ever further than 20 minutes from a toilet on the transport network if ever they need one. And so that's kind of the goal of where we're trying to head to. And we have a toilet tube map essentially that actually shows the location of where all the toilets are. Whenever we talk about toilets, though, I do really want to stress they are a very challenging area. Antisocial behaviour is rampant in loads of the toilets, and it can be really challenging just trying to keep them open, keep them safe, keep them accessible for everyone. Yeah. And so it's a really complex picture, but the goal is that 20-minute travel time to a toilet anywhere in London.
Thank you so much for answering.
Sorry, Frankie.
No, you're all good.
Yeah, do you want to go to Stephen now? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve Bennett from Arab. Fantastic event. Thank you very much. Just a quick question, really, on are there any international examples you know of countries or cities that do this well?
Yeah.
Maybe intentionally, sort of through planning, or even unintentionally, kind of just because of the built environment and the culture.
The absolute key case studies are Vienna, which basically invented gender mainstreaming about 30 years ago, and have done a whole program across the whole city. They have a gender mainstreaming manual. This baton has then been taken on by the city of Umeå in the north of Sweden. I'm really glad you asked that question, because there was something I wanted to say, because they are a brilliant example of how you can create change. They've changed the built environment, they've done culture change, they've done all sorts of things across the city, and they've built lovely things as well. Because one of the things I say a lot is not being murdered and not being raped in terms of safety is quite a low bar. Surely we can be aiming places that women enjoy. And they built in Umeå, they built beautiful things. There's this lovely wooden bus station that it's got brilliant sight lanes, but it's also just a joy to be in. And the big point about Umeå is that it's worked. In the daytime, 99% of residents felt safe to walk the streets of the city. After dark, almost 9 out of 10 women feel safe to walk on their own at night. So change is possible. We can do it. It's also, to go back to the benefit thing, they are in an area, North Sweden, where a lot of towns are losing, and cities are losing population. People are moving to Umeå because of the quality of life. You know, it has a real benefit for them. So yes, absolutely. And there are lots of individual examples in Amsterdam, in Stockholm as well, but Umeå is absolutely the flag bearer.
How do you spell it? We need to Google it.
It's UMEA with a little dot over it. If you come and find me on LinkedIn or my website's in a place, and there's a really good article in English in a Swiss newspaper that gives you all the information you need. So I can share that with people if they want. Also, I'm just going to do a very quick bit of it. It's not to go back to the thing we were talking about, sharing information. So my background is actually, I'm really a TV producer. I've just fallen into this. And so I'm setting up a newsletter, which is basically not just to talk about what I do, not even really much to talk about what I do, but to share good examples. So like this week, there's somebody who's created a brilliant tool for how to engage with people in parks. There's another lovely document about how to work with teenage girls. So all of this stuff. So come and find my website, and that will be going out, the first one this week, which I say out of mostly altruism, I think, as well as a bit of showboating.
Yeah, let's go. We've got a question online from Glenn Lyons. Thinking about social model of disability versus the medical model, in the panel's view, to what extent are equitable, safe communities about the conduct of interactions of people as opposed to physical design, but recognising the interplay between the two? So I think we have kind of covered this in terms of how do you
Thanks for the dictionary. Can you repeat that?
So the social model of disability versus the medical model, in the panel's view, to what extent are equitable, safe communities about the conduct and interactions of people as opposed to physical design?
Yeah, and I would say you have to have both sides. Like TfL has I sit here talking about public realm and the way we design the places, but we've got a whole other team talking about bystander training and training up our staff and the rest of it. It is that in the government strategy, the Vault government strategy, it says we all have sort of a part to play. All out, no one is not partaking in reducing vulva and making women and girls feel safer. We all have a part to play, and none of us can let it decide down as such. It could be the nicest looking place in the world, but if the, as Glenn was saying, what is the words he used are, if the conduct and interaction of people is letting the side down. We all know if really nice places, if they're full of people, if we don't belong in those places, we won't go there.
I'm going to answer that with two quotes. One is the famous Leslie Kern one, which is that no amount of lighting is going to abolish the patriarchy. But less well known is Eva Kyle, who led the gender mainstreaming in Vienna. got a lot of flack for creating a housing development that was based around the needs of women as the primary caregivers of children. And she said, well, men should be doing all the work too. And she said, and it's a quote I love, she said, we are aiming for utopia, but we are building for where we are now. So the answer is, I think, somewhere in the middle of those two quotes. Yes, absolutely, buildings can't change everything, but they can help. But we also have to change society at the same time. It's not an either or, it's not a choice. We just keep doing both.
Yeah. Anything on that? I agree. Yeah. Definitely, I think you're
Right, one more question from the audience. I've got in the middle here with the white shirt. Yeah, really quick question.
Hi. So I grew up in Central Asia, where quite often women's safety is framed by politics and religion. And I was kind of wondering how the research and projects done in the UK could perhaps benefit other countries which are struggling with women's safety. And are there any projects that are being worked on which share the knowledge base?
So I know we've been discussing with my colleagues at the Greater London Authority about how London take more of a role in terms of our sharing our good practice, which we do anyway. And we met with the Paris Authority a few weeks ago to share knowledge. And one of our focuses was around things like AI and technology. There's a lot of stuff there, so we're really trying to work together. We all recognise we haven't got loads and loads of money, so let's work together on common problems, common themes. So we're trying in those areas. Something more global. No, Publica are doing stuff. Yeah. Publica are doing a lot of work globally. So there's a company called Publica who we do a lot of work with. And they're doing a lot of work in terms of feminist cities. So we've got 6 feminist cities at the moment, and there's a lot of sharing going on in that area in terms of design.
There is a lot of research. There is a lot of good research from other countries as well. I mean, the care box model comes from Colombia, and because the challenges of particular countries, because the amount of unpaid care work done by women in Colombia is off the scale. And some of the really interesting work on the financial implications of women's mobility has been done in South America. So I think we need to do what we're trying to do here, which is here we're trying to have a network of women talking in the UK, but we also need to extend that network internationally so that everybody can share in the huge amount of really good. I think some of the best research has actually come from outside the UK, and we're actually using research from outside the UK to inform what we're doing. So the work is out there.
Just to the point, to address the political element, I would say this topic is very politically driven. We are in quite a polarised time. I think language is very key in how we talk to this, and sometimes, unfortunately, you do have to tailor the way you speak depending on who you're talking to kind of get this message to land. So I think that's really key. Equally, one of the recommendations that we are putting forward in our ATE, Active Travel England report, is around some sort of platform, online website for just information around where to go for good research, good case studies, good data, just one place that people can go to, because that's something that's constantly coming up time and time again. Like even in our review, we've reviewed about 50 documents, so much literature, there's so much out there. It's actually overwhelming how much is out there, but it's just directing people to one place. And what we want to do within our guidance document is not create another huge long document, but pinpoint as well to where there's good practice already. So the GLA toolkit on how to undertake women's safety audits. We did a day with TfL where there were 60 of us in this room the other week. We did like a hackathon type day. And this isn't a criticism by any means, but I said in the room, who is aware of this resource? Because I highlight it all the time. It's a great resource, and not a single person put their hand up. So we need to get better at disseminating. Oh, there's the draft one online.
Yeah, it's not been launched.
Well, that makes sense. Sorry. I didn't point the draft one.
You'll hear about it when it's launched.
We aren't very good at disseminating information either, so we need to get better at that.
Yeah, the Women's Safety Audit will officially be launched when the Mayor releases his new VALG strategy.
Oh,
so
well, I've been
there we go. But yeah, the draft is online. Don't tell anyone.
Do you want to add anything? Yeah, I'll have the last word.
Yeah. Probably not really answering your question, but I think one of the things that we picked up from the Paddington site is that one of the questions being asked is your site benefiting the wider area? But then thinking about that, we've assessed that, but then it's particularly hard, particularly challenging to just justify for the funding for places that you don't own, you don't have ownership of, and thinking about management as well of that particular thing. It could be, a park that's managed by someone else. It could be a bench that you're trying to remove it because they're in the way, but it's something that's outside of your control because of management and ownership issues.
Great.
Oh, you
Thank
haven't
you.
got her. She hasn't got us.
Where's the other one? Oh, it's there.
Sorry.
Thank you. I think this evening's proved that we could talk about this topic for a long time. We have overrun already. And I think there's been some really, really great case studies, examples, challenges, things that we can do better. Really, really good, insightful discussion there. So thanks very much to all our panelists who have joined us tonight. Thank you very much for our hopefully that's inspired you to take something away back to your day jobs and think, how can we now try and apply this in what we do? So thank you very much, and hope to see you at another TPS event soon. So thank you.